Well, my name is George Mitchell, and I'm trapping beavers for the farmers in this area. And I also trap for TransAlta Power because they have lots of problem with the beavers in return canals. And I also, in the summertime, live trap for the Research Council. I have a trap in here. The water's extremely shallow. Most of the food cache is on top of the ground, but there are beavers in here. I put this trap in on 3 days ago, and I caught a beaver the night before last and one the night before that, and I think there's one here now by the look of the bubble, so let's have a look. Well, there's a big one, caught absolutely perfect to where they should be. Now this is a nice beaver, weigh about 50 pounds. You see where another one's taking a chunk out of his tail fighting. More beavers there are, the more fighting they do. The reason he's in there like that, if you throw him on the sleigh, he'll just freeze in and then tear the hide off him. Now this one here, if the water's deep, it has a tendency to float up, so I have a mold. I make weights, lead weights, to put on the bottom so it'll stay vertical. And this one here, quite easy to make. Piece of 1x4 or 1x3 on the sides. And the real advantage of this, I'll show you in a moment here. What I like about it is that you've got it at the proper depth when you put it down there. You slide it down the hole carefully till it hits the bottom. Beaver most of the time swims right along the bottom, or maybe 2 or 3 inches up off the bottom. When you put this trap down, you feel it on the bottom. It's ideal, easier to set. A week from today I'll be 82 years old, and when I put that type of trap in, I have to get down on my hands and knees to put the wire around, and it makes it awkward for me, so I make a lot of these, and I find them excellent for in deeper water. And the real advantage, the beaver won't try to swim over the top, he'll come through it. You've always got to put these holding dogs back up here and tie them. I put a piece of wire on there and just twist the wire around it, because occasionally you forget to tie them up. The beaver will trip the trap, and one of these will hook on there, and of course he doesn't get caught. This one here, you'll notice, triggers on the bottom. When I set the trap, it'll be standing straight up, and the advantage of this, of course, is that it does less damage to the good fur on the beaver's head, or on the beaver's back. This is underneath the belly, which isn't as important as the skin on the back. Got to be extremely careful with them. They're touchy. This is a real advantage, this safety gripper. Once you get it there, get your hand away from it. But you'll see how much easier this is for me to put in than that other type trap. All I have to do is take it down here. Now it's sitting right on the bottom, no problem with it. Get a stick like this, poke it through, just more or less to hold it where you want it. And I do a lot of trapping. This property belongs to Porter Ranches, and over there they have their own man-made dams. And the beavers come along and move into these dams, and the first thing they do when the water's running through the culverts, plug the culvert. And because it's an earthen dam, it washes it out. 3 winters ago, they lost 6 purebred bulls, went through the ice by a beaver pond, and 2 days after lost in another pasture 4 purebred Simmental heifers. A loss of about $75,000 to them, and no insurance. And all caused by the beaver. Lots of ice out on the ponds, but very little around the houses where the beavers are moving back and forth, and that's where the cattle walked and went through the ice.
This is a good spot to take a few minutes to look at. This is an area where the beaver were in here and have moved on now. They've used up all the available food in this area and they've moved out of here. So we end up with a beaver house that's, the water level has dropped down so low that we get a pretty good look at how they operated in this area. The water level here before the beaver left was probably about here where my hand is height. And this is a house, typical house. They swim under the water, and they have entrances where they come through their runs, as we call them, into the house, and they come up out of the water and live inside their house. They've got a shelf in there where they eat and sleep and so forth. So what I really wanted to highlight here is this hole here is one of these runs that we talk about, where the beaver are coming in and out of the house all the time. And this is kind of rare. We don't get to see this that often because this is so dried up. There is a little bit of ice under the snow underneath my stick here, but most of the water's gone now. And this is one of these holes where they're going in and out, and places that we're looking for. If we have to take animals out of an area, we have to be able to find these. So this gives you a look at it from a house that's no longer active. Something worthy of mention here, when we come up to a beaver house, such as the one we have here, or even a smaller one, wherever there's activity of beaver when we're on the ice in the wintertime, it's very extremely dangerous in the fact that the beaver runs that we've mentioned and tried to explain to you, the beaver are living under the ice. There's snow on top of the ice, and we don't see the activity that's going on in a place like this, but there can be several beaver. There can be up to a dozen beaver in a place like this. So they're constantly in and out of their house, picking up sticks and food from underneath their food cache and back into their house. So what's taken place is that the ice is so thin in those areas that sometimes just your weight is enough to fall through the ice. And if you're even 2 feet away from that run, the ice could be 1.5 feet thick. So it's hard to believe it when you're standing there looking at it. But anywhere where there's activity, and they're not all always living in that house, they could be in the banks beside the house, and wherever they have runs are going in and out. So we've got to use extreme caution when we're moving around any beaver activity, an active house, such as this one, or even, as I said, smaller in the middle of the winter time. We've got to be careful. Well, we're in a spot here where there's a good stand of the trembling aspen, or the white poplar, and that's a favorite food of the beaver. And we've stopped here to take a look at this. It's in an area where the beaver have nothing's been done with them for a few years, and there's so many beaver in this area that they've pretty much knocked down everything that is around us here. This is kind of gives us a view of what can take place when they really go to work. In the fall, when they're building their food supply to store food under the ice, they drop all these trees and then they take the limbs and put them underneath the ice out front of their house, and that's how they survive the winter. So this has pretty much been logged off, this whole area that's even close to the water.